The single-player campaign of the third Warhammer 40K Dawn of War real-time strategy game is a bloody mess, in both the good and bad senses. The pendulum has swung back toward larger armies and basic base building, which is fine, but its scattered pace and complex mechanics make it tough to dive into. In this review in progress, I'm covering only the single-player campaign. The final review will follow close to launch on April 27th. With its focus on controlling multiple hero characters next to disposable troops, Dawn of War 3 feels like a spiritual successor to Blizzard's divisive Warcraft 3. It's big on spectacle, including battles with absolutely gigantic super units, flashy and bloody effects, and bodies flying everywhere. It looks great, and while the animations might not have quite the gory flourish of those in Dawn of War 2, they're still outstanding. The counterpoint is that high settings were too much for even my GTX 1080 while running at 1440p. The lengthy 17-mission campaign is driven by a paint-by-numbers Warhammer 40K story full of WrestleMania-like shouting.
We need to finish the mission. Vengeance is a luxury we cannot afford.
Cycling between the Space Marine, Orc, and Eldar factions. Each takes 20 minutes to an hour, so there's no shortage of content. It felt even longer because there's no autosave, so it's easy to lose an hour of progress if you don't do it manually. The factions differ from each other in a few interesting ways. The Orcs, for instance, upgrade themselves using scrap piles, a unique resource that's generated by towers or left behind after vehicles and buildings are destroyed. And they can also reinforce squads on the go with certain units. The Eldar can teleport their buildings anywhere on the map and then warp their armies between any two. But it's surprising that the level design doesn't take more advantage of each faction's traits to do something unexpected. There's a fair variety of fighting from point A to point B, holdouts, and no base scrounging, but that's about it. On the first playthrough of the campaign, Dawn of War 3's micromanagement-heavy unit mechanics feel complex for complexity's sake. There's layer upon layer of status effects and subtle rules and separate progression systems for all three factions and individual heroes. It's a lot to take in, and it doesn't go out of its way to teach you things like which units counter which. And the scatterbrained way that you almost never play the same faction for more than one mission before switching to another meant it was late in the campaign before I felt all that comfortable with any of them. As a Dawn of War 2 and Company of Heroes veteran, I'm also annoyed at the lack of a retreat button. Since you're still strongly incentivized to bring damaged squads back to your base to reinforce them with fresh troops, it's maddening. Relic deserves credit for not simply remaking the same game with prettier graphics. But from a single-player perspective, this hybrid approach doesn't feel as strong as Dawn of War 2's memorable tactical focus. If I had to score it now, I'd give it a 7.2 for good. Check back next week for the final review, including my thoughts on Dawn of War 3's multiplayer mode.